Hello friends, welcome to the Angular 10 tutorial series. In this tutorial, we will see about the Angular introduction and the versioning as of now, how many Angular version is released by the Google, and we will see like why we use Angular in our application and what all are the benefits we get when we run or create our application with the Angular. In the previous tutorial, we have seen like Angular 10 features and upgradation, and like how we can create our previous Angular application to the Angular 10. So I recommend you please go to the part 1 and 2 and see like what all are the new feature related to the Angular 10. So let's understand like what is the Angular and why we use this Angular. So this is basically Angular is a client side application, and it's a very popular framework which is developed and maintained by the Google, and it's a open source front end development which is used to create the mobile application and as well as the web applications. And Angular is a platform and a framework for making client application in HTML and the HTML and the TypeScript. And basically like we write the Angular code into the TypeScript, and when we run this our Angular application on the browser, internally it converts TypeScript to the JavaScript, and like all the code in the Angular itself written in the TypeScript. And recently like Angular 10 is released by the Google on 25th June and 2020, and this is the recent version which is running on the market. So basically this Angular 10 is released recently just after the release of the Angular 9. So this Angular 10 contain major features and enhancement with the Angular 10. And basically this Angular application is a front-end and client-side JavaScript framework. So that is the introduction of the Angular. Now like if we are going to create our Angular 10 application, so like what all are the technology or knowledge we should have before working with the Angular 10. So like we should have some basic knowledge related to the technology, like we should have knowledge on the HTML, DOM and the CSS. And apart from this we should have the JavaScript knowledge. Basically like when we create any web application, then obviously we work with the HTML, CSS and the JavaScript. So we should have some basic knowledge, so it will be much helpful when we create the Angular 10 application. And apart from this, if we have a basic knowledge on the TypeScript, is a good thing. If we don't have, also like when we are working with the Angular 10, we will understand like how TypeScript code we write into the Angular 10. And apart from this, we should have a basic knowledge on the OOPs, because like as we know, like this Angular is a component based architecture. So like we have to initialize the component and the services we have to initialize. So like how we operate those things, like creating an object. So we should have a basic knowledge on the OOPs. And like if we are like recently we came Angular 10 came in the market. If we start working from the 10 only, then yes, we can create our application, and for that like previous knowledge of the Angular is not required. We can start working with the Angular 10 itself only. So like as of now, how many Angular version came into the market? So like Google is the owner of releasing the Angular versions. So like first they have released Angularjs in 2010, and after that like they start release, like after 6 years they released Angular 2. So there is a big major difference between the Angularjs and Angular 2 plus, because this Angularjs is a model view controller architecture, MVC architecture, but Angular 2 plus is basically a component based architecture. So there is a big difference between all these versions. So Angular 2 came in the 16, then Angular 4 came into the 2017. So like after Angular 2, directly Angular 4 came because of the some routing, like in the Angular 3 basically some routing enhancement done. So like if we release the Angular 3, then there is some major difference we used to get into the Angular 3. So they came with the Angular 4 with the routing management, properly routing management, so we can call our component properly. So that's why after Angular 2, Angular 4 released, and so on, like Angular 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 came as per the in 1 year. And then recently we are working with the Angular 10, which is recently released in 25th June of 2020. So this is the version of the Angular. So now, like, how Google release all these versions, like based on some criteria they release it. So that is based on like three parts: major, minor and patch. Like suppose if we are going to release Angular versions, then it contain like I will take an example of the version like 2.5.6. It means like if they are releasing the 2, it means they are releasing the major version, and 5 indicate to the minor, and 6 is for the patch. Like suppose in an organization we are working, then like in the 3 months we used 3 or 4 month, or 2 or 3 months we used to release our product into the market. So basically that time we take and we release after months, so that is the major version. But after releasing that major version, we get some issues from the client side, then we have to give the hot fixes. So those is basically a patches, because we have to give the fixes as soon as possible. So this is the type of the versioning into the Angular. And the next is like Angular 10 features and update. So this topic we have already talked about into the previous tutorial. So I recommend you please go to the part 1 and see like what are the Angular 10 features and update. So briefly we already have talked about there. So these are the some list like Angular 10 with the feature like TypeScript, date range picker. So like date range picker, like in previous versions of the Angular, like we used to have like start date and end date, different date time picker. But in Angular 10, in the one date range picker, we can have the start date and end date. And apart from this, there are some features like depreciation and the removals, default browser configuration, common JS library, Angular bug fixes from the previous version. So we already have talked about all this briefly in the previous tutorial. And apart from this, like Angular 10 contains some feature. These are the features like in the previous version also these features contains, like speed and performance. Obviously with the Angular 10 this is also form up with the good speed and the performance, and it's a modular application, and it's a cross platform. So these are the some specification related to the Angular, not specific to the Angular 10. Like it's basically Angular is a single page application, and like when we are going to work with the Angular, then it contains like single page application. So what is basically, it is like website that interact with the web browser by dynamically rewriting the current web page with new data from the web server instead of default method of the browsing loading entire new page. So like on the one page only we are having all the forms. So when we click on the particular like menu or something, then we go to that particular div. Like instead of reloading that entire page, it go to the particular div form. So that's why this single page application also is supported by the Angular. And apart from this Angular RESTful API, and it use the type scripting. So these are the features related to the Angular and Angular 10. So in the coming tutorial we will see like how we create our first Angular 10 application, and day by day we will understand what are the new feature came into the Angular 10, how we create our Angular application. So according to this tutorial, like this is the things like how the versioning works into the Angular, and as of now how many versions of the Angular came into the market. So if you have any question or doubt, please comment. Thank you.